Hey guys, so most of you know by now that the transcript we're about to go over was not really supposed to be released today. Blake Lively has been keeping all her exhibits redacted. The parties and the third parties have been going back and forth about what will or will not remain sealed, and the judge has not yet ruled on that. So early this morning or very late last night, she put out, it was something with a bunch of exhibits attached that they were all sealed, except she conveniently did not seal the full deposition transcripts of Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath. Now we've seen a lot of pieces of redacted pieces of depositions from Justin and Jamie, but these are like the full-blown 2 days worth of testimony transcripts. And what the worst part was, she decided to, blast their home addresses to everybody on the internet. And like I said, conveniently, those were the only two that were, left, or that were not sealed properly when they filed that. Everything else was fine. Everything pertaining to her exhibits and all that, her testimony has been fine, but just these two, and she left, not even just left them there, it was fully highlighted, because those were the parts of the depositions that were supposed to be confidential. Justin and Jamie apparently did not object to everything else being out there, but their home addresses, yeah, that should have been redacted, but they didn't do that. Wayfair has filed a letter with the judge tonight, but the public version of that letter just says they are requesting to seal a letter that they're filing in regards to that confidential information being put out there without the sealing. So we can't actually see the substance of the letter. Just know that they filed one. I have no idea if they asked for sanctions or not. The judge is not going to, impose any sort of punishment without the Wayfair parties asking for sanctions. I think we can go ahead and say that for sure, just based on how things have been going. If the Wayfair parties don't ask for him to consider sanctions, he's not going to do that. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we've looked at how many violations at this point. They're very bad at, whether intentionally or not, very bad at keeping people's information private that should absolutely be private. And that's why so many of the third parties who she subpoenaed were freaking out, I don't want you having my address and shit. So, all right. Jill199, thank you for the $5. Thanks for your dedication. I think they really screwed up this time. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So I don't know if they have asked the judge for sanctions or not. Just know that something was filed that we can't see. So, all right. So we do have Justin's transcript to go over tonight a little bit. This is broken up into 2 days. And on the first day, it was mostly Stephanie Jones questions. So we're not going to go over that tonight because I could not possibly do all this tonight. It's 300-something pages, but each page of the transcript has 4 pages on it, so that was never going to happen. I did go to the part where Blake's attorney, Michael Gottlieb, is questioning Justin, and I picked out some of the parts where we hadn't seen everything or seen it all. I skipped over some of the stuff that I had read to you guys previously from the exhibits. And so we're just going to go over some of the stuff we haven't seen before or haven't seen the whole thing because there were redacted portions. Not going to get through the whole of it tonight. Absolutely not. That's going to take a couple different streams probably. I intend to do another one tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. So it just depends. So let's get into what we have for tonight. I'm starting at page 183 on the PDF. Let's see. All right. Like I said, there's 4 pages per page. So it goes like this. You start reading from the top left, scroll down, then the third page is over here on the top right, and then you go down to the bottom, right? So we're starting where he's asking about, Justin talking about porn and his relationship to porn from the book. Blake's attorney is asking him about this. Here's an excerpt that Justin apparently said during the interview. Hold on one sec. Okay. When you hit 11 or 12 years old and your friends have a phone, maybe you don't, and you're being shown things for the first time, and then you start to think, that is what women want. And in porn, as we know, no means yes or try harder. That is often what's depicted in porn, and that's kind of a bad thing for young boys who are growing up and watching that. But it starts to become very confusing, which is definitely something that happened to me. And so Mike Gottlieb is asking him about this for some reason. It's unclear why this is really coming up, but I guess they can ask about anything. Mike says, do you recall ever saying anything like that? Is that what happened to you? And then Justin says, when I was sexually assaulted, yes. And then Gottlieb's quoting him again. He says, you said after that, I'm sure I have crossed boundaries and lines in my teens and 20s, not even thinking about it simply because of the porn I was consuming. Was that true? Justin says, again, I don't know. I said, I'm sure I had, but I have never never not had consent with a woman. It was said in most of my book and most of my speaking is speaking to men so that men don't have to feel ashamed of whatever it is they're experiencing. So in that certain situation, I'm not saying that I've crossed boundaries or not gotten consent, but what I'm essentially saying is there's even a possibility that in my teens and 20s, I wasn't aware. Okay. So there was no like intentional boundary crossing or no lack of consent. But he's kind of saying that when young men, boys are consuming pornography, they're being exposed to something that's teaching them that no means try harder, no means yes. And that's not how you want young boys and men to grow up understanding consent. So I don't understand what the point of this really is other than to badger him about that. I know we have seen some of this before, so I'm not going to read all this word for word in this section. Okay. My question to you is, do I understand your testimony to be that you were essentially making that up in order to make other men feel that you were relatable to them? He says, no, I'm sure I had crossed boundaries in my teens and 20s. I'm sure I have. And do you think that was because of the exposure you had to this kind of toxic pornography? I'm sure that was part of it. It was a whole different time. And part of why I wrote the book was that consent wasn't taught to boys. And I wanted to make sure that we taught consent to boys and men. Okay. Again, not sure why this has, any relevance at all. But yeah, I know Teresa, but I don't like to filter myself here, so YouTube's going to have to get over it. I think that when it comes to heavy topics like this, I try as much as possible not to censor my words. I think that it's, taking away the meaning of the conversations we're having, which is important. And I understand why other people do it, because it sucks when your ad revenue gets pulled because you're using certain words. But at the same time, I'd rather just speak freely and not make any ad revenue money, you know what I mean, than say like corn, because we're talking about pornography. So that's what's going on here. So I'd rather just speak freely. So, all right. If I told you, Mr. Baldoni, that quote I just read to you was from a discussion you had with No More being the nonprofit for domestic violence survivors that they worked with when they were making the film, does that refresh your recollection at all in 2023? Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that in a discussion with No More, you said you were sure that you had crossed boundaries and lines in your teens and 20s, not even thinking about it simply because of the porn I was consuming? He says, no, it doesn't surprise me. Did you ever consider whether people listening to that conversation with you and No More might be upset or triggered by that statement you made? So that's kind of silly, I think. So when you're having important conversations surrounding domestic violence and consent and stuff like that, you have to be able to have open conversations. And I totally understand that can be a triggering thing. But if you're going to work in this capacity with an organization to prevent domestic violence and abusive relationships, you have to be able to have those conversations so you know what to do, the best way that you can protect people from that in the future. So saying, did you consider whether people listening might be triggered or upset? I mean, it's possible they were triggered or upset, but at the same time, it's like, if we strayed away from having conversations about everything that triggered or upset people, those things would never go away because we would just never talk about it. You know what I mean? Okay. Justin says, no, as this is a conversation that is about healing, and these are conversations I'd had with the women at No More, and I can think anybody that works in this space can agree that pornography, when given to young people, messes with their brains. And we need all hands on deck. So I have no problem being open about what was a pornography addiction in my, early teens and 20s. Mike Gottlieb says, when did you free yourself of the addiction? He says, so I don't have a clinical addiction. I will start there. So he's basically saying here, he's never been diagnosed with a pornography addiction. It was something that he talked about. He says, because I felt I was consuming porn when I was emotional or in my teens, when I felt lonely, mixed with hormones changing and all the various things. And I also wasn't exposed like a lot of boys and men are today because I was born with dial-up modems. So, people these days, everything's in your pocket, right? Okay. I've probably been free of it since I felt like I had one. I'd say early 30s, right? But it's fair to say that you have spoken openly and publicly about having an addiction to pornography for some period of time earlier in your life. Yes, I was just clarifying because addiction is, and then Gottlieb says you're not a doctor, right? Okay. You attended Miss Lively's deposition, correct? He says, I did. Do you remember at her deposition when your counsel, Mr. Friedman, asked my client, Miss Lively, would it surprise you that Justin never had an addiction to pornography? Justin says, I don't remember that. Okay. By Mr. Gottlieb, why would somebody who knows anything about you say that? Justin says, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Gottlieb says, you don't believe that having an addiction to pornography absolves men of whatever they do as a result of that addiction, do you? He says, far from it. Okay. And you believe men who cross boundaries with women should be held accountable for that, right? Justin says, I think crossing boundaries is a very general, broad statement, definitely true. But if based on whatever the boundary that was crossed, I think there should be an appropriate reconciliation, conversation, atonement. Okay. If one partner, regardless of gender, to a relationship, romantic, sexual, or otherwise, sets a boundary, do you believe that boundary is negotiable? Justin says no. So once the boundary is set, somebody crosses it, you believe the person who crosses the boundary ought to be accountable. Justin says yes. Okay, so this is where it gets really ridiculous. They're talking about a scene in Jane the Virgin here. We know Justin was one of the stars of Jane the Virgin. Britney Spears made like a little cameo in that show once, maybe twice, but at least once. And so that's what they're talking about here. Mike Gottlieb says, do you recall meeting Britney Spears on the scene of Jane the Virgin? Do you recall talking about that and telling a story about how I went up and gave her a hug, or I gave her a hey? I was like, hey, I gave her a big hug and I think I scared her because she was like, hi. And then I just kind of had this awkward moment of like, did I just harass Britney Spears? Do you recall saying that? Justin says, I don't recall saying that, but I believe I'm sure that I said it. That's pretty clearly a joke. Like he was obviously feeling socially awkward there. He got overly excited, went up to her, hugged her, or whatever. And if she, had any sort of problem with that and said something to him about it, I'm certain that he would have felt extremely embarrassed and corrected himself immediately. But this is obviously not like an actual harassment scenario going on here. Is that consistent with your recollection of how you remember that occurring? What I just said. He says, I don't remember giving her a hug. So maybe she did, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But I remember it. I think I was way too excited to meet her. Yes, but I don't remember the details of it. But I can't imagine that I was not telling the truth and sharing a story about it. Okay. She was very nice. Okay, I'm pleased to hear that. Have you ever been the subject of a workplace investigation, investigating any aspect of your conduct at work? He says, not that I can think of. Prior to the events of this case, are you aware of whether anyone has ever accused you of harassment? He says, to my knowledge, I have never been accused of harassment. Okay. He's never been disciplined and during his time at Wayfair Studios. I'm kind of paraphrasing now. Other than what has occurred in this case, has anyone to your knowledge ever refused to work with you on account of your behavior? He says, not to my knowledge. Wayfair produced the film Empire Waste. Is that correct? And I think we know where this is going. So give me one sec here. Okay. And who was the writer and director of Empire Waste? Claire Ayub. We know Claire Ayub is the person who recorded Steve Sarowitz without his knowledge, kind of baited Steve Sarowitz into saying certain things, and then released that recording to Blake Lively of her own volition. It was never subpoenaed. Nobody asked her to do that. She just decided, I'm going to record Steve Sarowitz, talk to him about his situation with the Lively stuff, make him feel safe, and then I'm going to hand over the recording of everything he says to Blake Lively, which is, that's not at all nefarious. So that's Claire Ayub, if you forgot. Were you involved in the production of Empire Waste? He says, in a similar way that I'm involved in other productions, yes. He helped with the creative. He helped cast it. I helped Claire get the main song for the film. Okay. So he's just talking about how they work together in the background. It sounds like you did a lot. He says, not in comparison to what an on-the-ground producer does, but it's just part of what I do. Okay. Do you recall visiting the set? He says, yes. Did Miss Ayub accuse you of misconduct? Justin says, no. Ever. No. You never heard from anyone that Miss Ayub had problems with your behavior on set or during the production of Empire Waste. I never heard from anyone that Miss Ayub had problems with my behavior. Mike says, even as you sit here today, have you still not heard anything? And again, I don't want to, nothing that you might have learned from your lawyers. So other than conversations you may have had with your lawyers, have you ever heard from Mr. Heath or anyone else at Wayfair Studios that Miss Ayub had problems with your behavior during the production of Empire Waste? Okay. Justin says, again, I'm just trying to be specific to your question. I have never heard that Miss Ayub had problems with my behavior. However, I am aware that Miss Ayub has signed a declaration that evidently said that I was abusive to her or something like that. Okay. Have you read that declaration? I have. And that's a declaration that Miss Ayub filed in this case, right? Justin says, surprisingly, yes. In the second paragraph of that declaration, Miss Ayub writes, I wrote and directed a film called Empire Waste, which was produced by Wayfair Studios, LLC. Justin Baldoni, a founder of Wayfair, was producer. As part of my work on Empire Waste, I had repeated negative interactions with Mr. Baldoni and his associates, including verbal abuse by Mr. Baldoni. I asked Wayfair that Mr. Baldoni not be permitted on set during the majority of production as a result of those experiences. Do you recall reading that? Justin says he recalls reading it. Did you verbally abuse Miss Ayub at any time? Justin says, God, no. So it is your testimony that Miss Ayub is lying on what she's written here. And, you know, Justin says, it's my testimony that I did not verbally abuse her. I don't want to call her a liar. And I wouldn't do very well during a deposition. I would be like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying she's a liar. Like, you know, I would not be able to. No. Have you ever talked to her about whether she feels that you verbally abused her? Justin says, I spoke to her many times, especially after what could be considered an incident, and we had a lovely relationship, which is why I was invited to set, and I was very surprised. Okay. Did anyone ever tell you that Miss Ayub had asked to have you removed from set? Justin says, no. Even as you sit here today, no one's ever told you that. Justin says, no, I was never asked to be removed from her set. On the contrary, I was invited. And I'm sure he could prove that if he needed to. Did you also read in Miss Ayub's declaration that, as read, Empire Waste was set to be released in the fall of 2024 in August of that year? As a result of my experiences with Mr. Baldoni and ongoing press coverage relating to Mr. Baldoni and It Ends With Us, so she never really made a deal of anything until the bad press coverage over It Ends With Us, right? I requested that he not be involved in Empire Waste marketing or public relations efforts. So she sees he's getting a bad name in the press related to It Ends With Us. Then she requests he not be involved in the marketing or PR effort for her film. You know, okay, fine, but that doesn't mean he did anything wrong to you. Okay. Do you believe that statement is truthful or false? Justin says, I was not made aware that she did not want me to help promote the movie. Okay. Right. So here they're talking about some text messages. Who's Ashmi Dang? That is head of marketing for Wayfair. Andrew Kaloff, head of production and development. I guess these are texts between them, Mr. Heath and Angela Cardone. And then Tara Hanks, the president of Wayfair. Okay. There's a text between these people, and then they're showing it to him. And they say, do you see Miss Dang shares a screenshot of what she says is Claire's message with the group? Do you mind if I read the whole document? Justin says. So he reads the whole document. Do you see how Miss Dang has screenshot Claire's message? And do you see how Claire's message says, genuinely feeling effing sick. That man was banned from my set. He says, I see that. And do you see how everyone in this text chain understands that man is referring to you? Justin says, yes. Did any of the individuals on this text thread ever inform you that Miss Ayub believes she had had you banned from her set? Justin says, I'm not sure how she could have believed that. So that, to answer your question, no. All right. On the next page at the top, do you see Miss Dang writes, I'll add during the early days of working with her on the marketing, she called to express how upsetting the experience was for her, and she had language added to her agreement as a result. Okay, so remember, this is after everything's done and they're talking about marketing, and this is while everything about It Ends With Us is starting to, cause a controversy in the press. Okay. Do you see that? Do you know what Miss Dang is referring to with the language added to her agreement? Justin says this is the first I'm seeing of it. Did anyone ever talk to you about changes that were made to Claire Ayoub's agreement based upon how upsetting the experience had been for her? Justin says no. Okay. Do you see a bit lower down in the text? Miss Dang says, to close the loop, JB took down and reposted the trailer with updated copy. Okay. Do you recall reposting or posting at any time the trailer for Empire Waste? Justin says yes. Do you recall doing that around this time at the end of September 2024? Justin said I would imagine this was the time, yes. You earlier said something about what could be considered an incident that had occurred that you discussed with Miss Ayoub. What was the incident? Okay, 1 second, guys. Okay, so he's about to describe this incident, this infamous incident that upset Claire Ayoub so much. We're going to see what he has to say about it. Let's see. Claire and I had a lovely relationship. She was a first-time filmmaker, and I very much believed in the film that she was trying to make. Also, I was made aware that she was very inexperienced. So I had offered to mentor her and help her any way that I could. So we went back and forth. We had a few calls, I believe, and I was building a relationship with her from that point. And at the same time, Claire was working with her producing partner to get the budget in line for the movie. We had greenlit her movie at $2 million. It was a movie that no one else wanted. It was a movie that I believed in the message of very strongly, and I wanted to support her. Okay. And we had a partner at the time, which was Procter & Gamble. And it was my understanding that the budget had inflated from $2 million to $3 million, then to $4 million, then to $5 million. After multiple conversations with my executive team, she was unable to get the budget down. On a phone call with Procter & Gamble, I imagine there were 8 or 9, maybe 10 people on that call and ourselves. We were going through where we are with the budget. Procter & Gamble was not putting much in. We were the majority financiers, and it was very clear with her that we would not be making her movie if she couldn't get her budget down. That was the extent of the conversation. There was no voice raised. It was me simply acting as the chairman at the time. There was no president, or I don't believe there was a CEO, and I just said, we won't be making your movie unless you get the budget down. And my understanding was that she was very unhappy with that, and that she felt what was relayed to me that I threw her under the bus, which is also very typical. I mean, directors are unhappy with studios all the time when people won't make their movies for the price. But that was it. And then I think maybe a month went by, and I sent her a voice note before day 1 of filming. I'm sure by now you're familiar with my voice notes. Tell me more. Well, there was the voice note around the world I sent to Miss Lively that everyone has heard, I guess. And I sent her a lovely voice note saying how much I believed in her and the mission. And she responded. He's talking about Claire now. And we had a lovely text exchange. And we texted throughout most of production, to which point I then came to visit. So she invited him to visit after that. When was the conversation that you had with Miss Ayoub that you are recounting here? Okay. Before pre-production even began. I don't even know. Okay. This was in the dealing-making phase before there was even a contract, before we had agreed to make the movie, right? Okay. Before there was a set? There was no set, yes. And it was over Zoom. Nobody else wanted Miss Ayoub's movie. Justin says no. Gottlieb says, you saved it. Justin says no, like very often people come to us when other studios or companies don't believe in the films, and if we believe that it speaks to the mission of why we are here, we will take the risk. Okay. Gottlieb says, you said everyone around the world has heard my voice note to Miss Lively. I mean, I don't think anyone really disagrees with that at this point. All right. He says I was making a joke, but yeah, that's because you released it, right? Justin says, actually, I did not release that, but... And then Gottlieb says, you instructed someone to release it on your behalf. Justin says, actually, I did not. You knew it was going to be released on your behalf. Justin says, that's privileged. Right, okay. Did there ever come a time in August of 2024 where you learned... Okay, hold on. There was a woman on TikTok alleging you invited her up to your hotel room years ago, and some incident that occurred alongside that. He says, I think I learned about that in Miss Lively's complaint. He also says he has no memory of that. Like I said, I believe I heard about it for the first time reading her CRD complaint. But if you have anything that can refresh my memory, I'm happy to look at it. Okay. Gottlieb says, have you reviewed that post since the filing of Miss Lively's lawsuit? Justin says, I have never seen it. Do you have any idea what this woman alleged? Justin says, from what I've been made aware since then, that I invited her to a hotel room. Do you know whether that occurred or not? Justin says, I have never invited a woman to a hotel room that wasn't my wife. Have you ever invited a woman to a hotel room before you were married? He says, no, I wish I was that confident before I was married. So to answer my question, you are sure that prior to your marriage and after your marriage, you have never invited a woman in any circumstance, in any capacity, up to a hotel room that you were staying in? Justin says, I am sure that before I was married or while being married, I have never invited a woman up to a hotel room that I was staying in. So I've never actually seen the video in question. Hey, Bruce, what's up? If anybody has, let me know. One sec, guys. But I always tell people this story. My friend Clayton, you guys might know him. He was one time the not a very popular bachelor, but he was a lead of The Bachelor at one point. And at one point in time, there was this lady on TikTok while he was dating a woman. Her name was Susie. He was dating Susie. And this woman in New York posted TikTok saying she hooked up with Clayton the prior night. And so everybody starts like bashing Clayton relentlessly, saying he's cheated on Susie. And then he finally is able to like prove that he wasn't there and that didn't happen because of his like location data from that night. At the time, it's like he was at the gym in Arizona or California or something like that. I can't remember, somewhere on the West Coast. And so he was like, no, I obviously didn't hook up with her last night. I was not in New York. I was very, very far away. There's no way that could have happened. And, you know, of course, the woman then retracts and makes an apology and says, oh, gosh, well, the guy that I saw said that he was the Bachelor Clayton. So this woman just didn't do any verifying at all whatsoever. She met a dude at a bar. They were drunk. He told her that he was Clayton the Bachelor. She believed it without verifying at all whatsoever. Slept with him, and then tried to ruin Clayton's reputation over it, insisting, even after he said, you know, I wasn't there, that he slept with her. And it was ridiculous. And she tried to ruin his reputation for that. It was insane. Like, anyone can go on TikTok and say anything. People do it, you know, to just about anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a nobody. People on social media will say like relentless, ridiculous stuff about you because that's unfortunately the nature of the internet. You can't believe everything you read about somebody. Always verify, you know? That's why I mostly stick to court stuff and not the pop culture stuff, because it's harder to verify stuff like that, right? You can only talk about rumors and like what people are saying, but I like to see something in writing that can show me this is absolutely what someone said. This is absolutely what happened. So, but yeah, crazy, right? Shouldn't she have known they didn't look alike? Well, she didn't even bother to check. And when she made her apology, like a small fraction of the people who saw the original post maybe saw that apology, right? So she like totally wrecked him, and then like nobody saw the retraction, right? And that's how that shit always goes, isn't it? So, all right. Anyways, before we get into this next section, let me read through these really quick, guys. I think I might have read this one, but I'm going to read it again anyways. Jill 199, thank you for the 5. Thanks for your dedication. I think they really screwed up this time. Elizabeth Schulman 958, thank you for the $10. Thanks for all your hard work bringing this information to us. I appreciate you. Michelle Campbell 4287, thank you for the $10. Just joined, backtracked to beginning, but finally caught you live, so I wanted to super chat. I beg you to go through all of the portions we haven't seen for both, even if broken up between lives. Yeah, I'll probably break this up between 2 or 3 different ones. Well, thank you. Kayla Dunn 5038, thank you for the 10. As an attorney, this was definitely deliberate to not seal the 2 depositions of men that she's going after. At this point, I'm completely convinced that her attorneys don't like her. I mean, like I said, these are the only 2 things in all of her exhibits that weren't sealed, and like not even the addresses were redacted. It's insane. So, all right, thank you guys. Anyways, he's moving on to a different subject here. It says, who's Shane Norman? Justin says, presumably not the woman you're talking about right now. Okay. Shane Norman is a former employee of Wayfair Entertainment. Okay, so they're getting into like somebody that used to work with when he's trying to launch the book Man Enough. And he says that Shane was brought on to figure out ways they could do activations and get more men involved. Did you know that Mr. Norman was being hired? He says, yes, I was introduced to Mr. Norman. We had a job interview together. I don't really know much, if anything, about Shane Norman, I don't think. So maybe you guys do, but I'm not totally positive. So We'll keep moving here. Okay. I'm going to skim over some of this that's not like really pertinent. You thought he would be good at the job for which you were hiring him. Justin says he presented fantastically. And it didn't work out that way, right? Justin says it did not. Mr. Gottlieb says, Mr. Norman was extremely abusive to women. And then Justin says, I think you're referring to Steve Sorowitz's testimony. I don't know if I would characterize it that way, Justin says. We discovered that he was very combative, and we had been made aware after some time, which we were frustrated we didn't know earlier, that he had made several women cry, and he was not listening to their ideas. Okay. And so apparently what Steve Sarowitz said about Shane Norman during his deposition was or not even during a deposition. I think this was like somewhere else he said this. I can't confirm that though. Hang on. Let's see. Let me read what Mr. Sarowitz said. So I think it was in his deposition. Okay. Okay. Anyways, this is Steve talking about Shane Norman. Steve says, we had an issue where we had an employee who was extremely abusive to women. It got to the point where each woman that they got in a meeting with was left with tears. Is that a truthful statement about Shane Norman? Justin says, I don't know. I don't know if every woman that he was in a meeting with was left in tears. Gottlieb says, did that statement fairly capture the gist of Mr. Norman's behavior when he was employed by Wayfair? Justin says, I can't speak to Mr. Sorowitz's intention with those words, but my understanding was that is maybe an exaggeration, but very well could be Mr. Sorowitz's view on what happened. Okay. All right. Steve. Gottlieb says, it seemed to me that Steve was trying to be truthful and trying to be accurate. Is that your impression? Justin says, I'm not saying he wasn't truthful. And then Gottlieb says, but you're saying that he was exaggerating. So trying to do a gotcha there. Justin says, I said that in my opinion, having handled the situation alongside him, I wouldn't have characterized it in that way. Okay. Mike says, do you know he said a little bit later that there were many complaints made about Mr. Norman? And when I said many complaints, do you know about how many? He answered, virtually every woman that they ever worked with. Holy shit. Who is this guy? He sounds like a nightmare, but I don't know who this guy is. What does this have to do with Lively's sexual harassment claims? Fucking nothing. I mean, no idea. Okay. So basically Justin's disagreeing with the characterization. Like, he wouldn't use those exact words. He doesn't know if every woman cried after meeting with Shane, but he seems to have agreed that he thought it was going to work out, that Shane would be great, but he did agree that that is not how it turned out. So I don't really know anything about this guy. I kind of want to look it up after though and see if there's anything to corroborate that. You know what I mean? Because I'm curious. Because the guy does sound like a total nightmare. Okay. Right. Got it. Spotlight Ship says, I was interested before in the Shane Norman stuff that wasn't released. Looks like Wayfair handled it okay to me. They didn't know how bad it was before they did the investigation. Then they fired him. Well, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You investigate and then fire them. If they actually did what they're being accused of, right? Which Shane Norman apparently did. Okay, got it. Oh, he sued Wayfair after. Oh, that's why that name sounds familiar. Okay. Wait, didn't he try to say it was like racism or something? Like, oh, so he was like lashing out at women who cried when they left his office because he was, apparently verbally abusive towards them. Apparently, I say, because they disagree on the characterization of that. But then he went and said, I was discriminated against. No, this sounds really familiar now because I remember getting those lawsuit documents and reading them. It must have been like a year ago, almost a year ago, like a little less than a year ago. That makes total sense now. Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. That was it. Wow. Okay. I totally forgot about that guy. Wow. I wish I could keep forgetting about him from what I'm hearing here, but okay. So he was yelling at women, making them cry. He got fired for, inappropriate behavior with them, I guess, after an investigation. And then he sued them for racism. Jesus, man. Oh, get a grip. Okay. I still have the lawsuit documents from that somewhere, but I'm not going to pull them up tonight, but all right. Did the investigation provide a basis for removing Mr. Norman from the position he was in? Justin said yes. Did you agree with it? Yes. Did you review the whatever the final report was that described his behavior? Justin said yes. Did you find that informative in understanding what had occurred? Yes. Okay, can we say something a little more substantial here? Let's see. You found it informative in understanding what had occurred, even though you had been present for a lot of what occurred. Is that right? Justin says not correct. You weren't present for any of the incidents that were described in the report of the investigation into Mr. Norman's behavior. Justin says, I was not. Okay, so the report was in writing. Got it. Anyways, I'm not really sure why we're still talking about Shane Norman here. It says multiple women made complaints, I guess, 2 or 3. Sounds like they investigated it and then fired him. So I'm not really sure, again, why we're still talking about this. But I don't... So Gottlieb says, was it important to you that it was women who did the investigation? Justin says, I don't remember it being important to me. Gottlieb says, well, you just brought it up right now. You said it was multiple women. I didn't ask you their genders. Why did your brain go to that? Oh, okay. So they're saying it was a group of former attorneys who do HR did the investigation. It was multiple women. It was 2 or 3 women. Okay. So Justin says it was like 2 or 3 female attorneys that did this investigation. And Mike Gottlieb says it was important to you that women did the investigation. Justin says, I don't remember that being important to me. And then Gottlieb says, well, you brought up that it was women and I didn't ask you their genders. So why did your brain go to that? Justin says, if you have a neuroscientist here, we could ask him. I have no idea. But as I recall, I can give you my understanding. I see things in pictures. So I'm very right-brained, I believe. And when I thought of the women who I had just seen in my mind on Zoom, they were in fact women. And so as my brain saw that, they were women, I said women. I hope that answered your question. That's awesome. I guess they should have brought in a neuroscientist for one of their expert reports, huh? Okay. Did you support Mr. Sarowitz's decision about the employment action to take with respect to Mr. Norman? I did. Okay. Okay, so he remained in a consulting or part-time position for a number of months, yes. And he continued to be paid, yes. And you supported that? I did. Okay, not surprising given he obviously had an issue that he was willing to go to court for, but okay. He later said they discriminated against him for, race or whatever, when it sounds like he had really terrible behavior. An outside investigation conducted by female attorneys concluded as much. They wanted to reprimand him, but not wrongfully terminate, I guess, depending on the state you're in or whatever, And so they kept him on a consulting position. He still got paid. And then he still afterwards tried to sue them for discrimination. My God, dude. All right. I have a family member who is that's autistic, ADD. He would say the same thing, thinking pictures. Yeah, I have that too. All of the above, actually. So I don't know. If I'm thinking about people, it's an image. It's not like, I don't know. An image is better for me. There's never a point in time where I don't see something. It's like I see something in my brain. It's very strange. Like there's never a point in time where I have a blank slate going on there. You know what I mean? I don't know if other people can describe it that way. I know everybody thinks differently. Some people think better in sounds and stuff. A lot of the times for me, it's just there's always an image there of something. I feel like I can never stop it. Anyways, that's not really pertinent to what we're talking about here, so I'm going to stop rambling. All right. Anyways, so they're asking about Maninoff. Again, they get to Liz Plank. And then we've read this part about Liz Plank in the excerpts, so I'm not going to read through the whole entire thing, but I will just kind of brush up on what was said here. So Ms. Plank wanted to discontinue a 3-year-long professional relationship at that time. So she left the podcast. Justin says, I imagine the New York Times article in the entire world thinking I was a bad man. He imagines that was the reason why. Apparently, Liz didn't tell him that. Liz didn't talk to anyone when she quit, like Justin or Jamie or anything like that. And then Mike Gottlieb says, was it not important to you to understand why she wanted to discontinue a relationship? Okay. And then he asks, Justin, you didn't reach out to her to talk about it? And he says, no. Gottlieb says, you weren't interested in hearing from her perspective on why she didn't want to be co-host of your podcast anymore. Justin says that's not it at all. And he says, my memory, if it's correct, was that when she resigned from the podcast, she had asked to pass on, and then he means pass on to Justin and Jamie, that she didn't want anyone to reach out to her. So Liz Plank didn't just like up and quit and say like, I can't believe you did this, blah, blah, blah. I have to leave. And I didn't have a discussion with them about it. She just read what Blake wrote in the New York Times, I guess. I bet she probably, based on what we've seen, knew what was coming in the New York Times. I know that we've seen her referenced in some other depositions, and we're going to probably read about that some more tomorrow. Not in Justin's, but in Jamie's, I think it was. But they find out that she left, and she tells the guy who was running it, his name was Tara. I think you pronounce it that way, Tara. It's not Tara Hanks. It's someone else. His name was Tara, and she tells Tara, Liz didn't want to be contacted. So she was like, I want nothing to do with these guys anymore, but I don't want to talk to them about it. I don't want to give them a reason, nothing, just like left. And like, on the one hand, if you don't know, okay, take out all of the context here and just think about Liz Plank, think about no other context. If somebody had such a bad experience with a job that they left and they never wanted to look back, okay, that's your right. I think it's unprofessional, but at the same time, if you had such a bad experience that it was like traumatizing in some way, okay. But you have to add the context of what was going on. Add the context of her pre-existing relationship with Blake. Add the context of, Ryan apparently supporting her. I think it was her book or something like that. And then just all this crazy stuff that went on. Her leaving and being like, yeah, I don't want to talk to you about it. That, to me, I can't speak for her. I can only speculate. So I cannot speak for her. But to me, it reads like guilt. To me, it reads like these people I've really supported, these people and I have really supported each other, and we've been doing a great thing with this podcast. But, Blake's going to win out on this one because she and Ryan have more power in Hollywood. I'm going to ditch, and I'm just going to say, please don't contact me. That's kind of what that seems like. Because didn't she put out some sort of public statement at some point on her Instagram or something? And then she just never said anything to everyone and refused to talk to them about it. So, like, it's not like she had a problem with them, raised the issue with them, and they had a conversation about it, and she was like, I'm sorry, but I don't think that I can move forward with you guys. She was just like, oh, shit, Blake came out publicly with this stuff, and, well, it's not looking good for you, so I'm going to dip now. By the way, don't talk to me again. Bye. It's pretty weird. It's pretty weird to me. Again, like I said, I can't 100% speak to her motives. I can only tell you what it reads like to me, knowing all the background. So, hey, April, what's up? How's it going? All right. So, I wanted to skim through a lot of this because we read it before. Maybe not word for word, but we read this part before. But okay, so on the set of It Ends With Us, at any point in time, did you have a practice of hugging people to start your day? Justin says, I think some people would qualify me as a hugger. Gottlieb says, is that a yes? Justin says, I wouldn't call it a practice. I also have a practice of high-fiving people. So, kind of sounds like if somebody didn't want to hug, he'd be totally open to not hugging them to me, but all right. My question was, on the set of It Ends With Us, at any point in time, did you have a practice of hugging people or giving hugs at the start of the day? Justin says, I wouldn't call it a practice, but if you ask a different version of the question, I might give you the answer you want. Maybe we should get the neuroscientist back in, huh? Gottlieb says, your lawyer is going to get really mad at you if you try to do that. All right. Are there any days that you can think of where you began the day by hugging multiple people at the start of the day's work? Justin says, sure, yes. Gottlieb says, on more than one day. Justin says, yes. Was it every day on the production of It Ends With Us? Justin says, did I give a hug to more than one person on every day? Gottlieb says, every day at the start of the day. This is very weird. I mean, you might. Maybe that's just how you relate to people, especially people that you worked with for a long time. Like if it's Justin and Jamie, who's his best friend or something like that. I don't know. Or if it's like one of the crew that they've worked with a bunch. Like if they go into the work and like the set, like their actual filming, it wasn't like it lasted for years, guys. It was like, what was it, like a few weeks? Maybe a couple months tops. I don't know. I know that Blake was apparently only on the set for 16 days or something like that. So it's not like the filming went on forever and ever. And they were like, you must hug me at the start of each day. And we must hug when the sun is to the east. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what happened. Like, what are you getting at here? All right, give me one sec, guys. Kitty Cat Florida 23 says, I'm sure it felt like years to them. Well, you know what? In this industry, in Hollywood and all that, I think that sounds like a pretty good employment record if it was years. You know what I mean? So maybe they would be happy about that. I don't know. But dude, the thing is, like, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit before, so I won't go off on too much of a tangent here, hopefully. I say hopefully because you never know with me. But if you work in an in-person setting like this, and I don't anymore for the most part. For the most part, I don't work with people in person anymore. So I don't think about this kind of stuff, right? But when I used to work in offices, I had coworkers who would like hug me or whatever. And I think when I worked in an office, I don't think to be honest, and this is just because I'm exceedingly awkward around people that I don't know that well, even though at least one of the places that I worked in was like a family business that I'd been around since I was a child, and I'd known all these people. I wouldn't hug someone without asking. I know that's like weird, but like if somebody was like really upset and having a hard day, because I worked in a field that was extremely emotional, especially like emergency psych stuff. And like if somebody's emotional, and I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, can I, give you a hug or whatever? Might do that. It wasn't like a regular occurrence, right? But it's not like that unusual for coworkers to hug each other, right? And they're working on this big emotional film about domestic violence. I'm saying like maybe somebody wants a hug every now and then. It's not the end of the world. And it's not like he's exclusively the one giving out the hugs. And he says it right there. I'm sure I did or got hugged. I don't know if I was exclusively giving hugs. The fact that you would have to like go over this mechanically in deposition. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm just so glad that our federal courts are being put to good use. All right. So, but still, if you're not a hugger and like somebody tries to hug you or somebody does hug you, just like as awkward as it might be, the intention is usually good. You know what I mean? I'm not saying always. There are some really creepy people out there, but I'm saying the intention is usually good. So like I would probably say like, hey man, like I noticed that you like to hug a lot. That's not really my thing. So if you don't mind, I would just like to not be hugged. As awkward as it is, it's like the human thing to do, right? Because the human thing, in my opinion, and this is again going back to my opinion, and this is all subjective with the hugging and everything is all going to be a little bit subjective. It's not that black and white. That's the human thing to do, is to like talk to somebody briefly about it. And I know that they're going to get into, and we've read over some of this stuff before, so I'm not going to read every single word here again. Did you hug cast members and members of the crew on May 15th, the first day of production? When you're saying hi to all these people that you're probably friends with or have a good relationship, when you start hugging, you're like, yeah, like, I think that's like a pretty human thing to do, is just to be like, hey, so I don't really like to be hugged. I understand you're not trying to be creepy or anything, but like, I understand, you're trying to be nice, but that's just not what I like. I don't like that. I don't like to be touched. I don't want to be high-fived. I don't want to be touched. Like, just do that. And I'm sure like these people seem like nice people who would be receptive to that and would oblige. You know what I mean? But if you speak up, say I'm the person in this situation who doesn't want to be hugged, and I speak up and I say, I'm sorry, I really don't like being hugged. It's just a me thing. I don't like to be touched like that. And they say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Keep that in mind. Okay, that scenario in mind. I'm at work. Somebody hugs me. I say, hey, I don't really like hugging, but I totally understand you're trying to be a nice person. So just please don't hug me anymore. And they say, oh my God, never happens again. Okay, keep that in mind because we're going to keep reading here. All right. Did you have any conversations before you hug people? about whether they were comfortable with physical touching. Justin says, not any more than people had with me when they came to give me a hug. So people came up and like hugged him. Some of these same people who testified to the culture of hugging would come up and hug him at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, right? And then it gets a little funny here. I think there's a human energy that two people maybe unconsciously exchange. And I think as somebody who doesn't always pick up on social cues, I worry about that a lot more than other people might. But I understand that most people can pick up on that kind of stuff, right? So maybe they don't ask like me, but they, I understand that people do feel that because I've observed other people just being like, that's a normal thing to do. You know what I mean? Even though I don't totally pick up on that because of my whole special brain. Let's put it that way. I have a special brain. He says, I'm not saying you have to believe in energy. I'm just saying that I think there's a human greeting when you're starting something that's going to be a journey, that's not going to be easy, where you're creating an environment. And oftentimes, like the way that I move through the world, I think I'm very open and people would oftentimes will hug me, present counsel excluded. So he's talking here about energy, and that's how he knows if someone's okay with being hugged. And then he says to Michael Gottlieb, I think there's just I think there's an energy, like, no offense, but I wouldn't give you a hug. So, like, my God, dude. All right, give me 1 sec. Stay away from me. Here's $5 if you don't hug me, random stranger. Hey, I will not touch you for free, but if you want to give me money, that's fine. I mean, that's fine. That's cool, man. All right. So he says, let's just bow like the Japanese. Hey, if that's what you're into, cool. All right. So Sunshine says, didn't we already touch on that you're only responsible for what you do after you're asked not to do something, as long as you honor people's wishes going forward? I mean, they're going to make it sound like no, but in my opinion, yes. So, but the thing is, my opinion won't ultimately matter when it comes down to judge and jury, right? It's going to matter what the law is. And I think the law, when it comes to sexual harassment in the workplace, it has to be like persistent and, pervasive or invasive or whatever it is. And I don't think this will rise to that level, because when he was told that it made someone uncomfortable, he stopped immediately, right? But, okay. And the policy that we walked through in the some link before, one of the things that referenced in it is hugging. Do you recall that? Okay. You also understand, because it's part of how you set up your studio, there are power dynamics at play in the workplace, right? So he's going to say, like, maybe some people weren't, maybe there's some people that have deeply held traumas that they have not exposed or fully gone through or talked about. Okay. And that might include somebody that has had trauma that makes them just uncomfortable with being touched. He says, absolutely. And that's what I'm talking about. The human thing to do there is to have a conversation with somebody about it, right? He says, you hugged Miss Lively on multiple occasions on the set, right? Every day. He says, how many times would you estimate on the set? So not outside of the set, but at work on the set. Justin says, are these hugs, I'm so sorry, are these hugs I initiated or that I was a recipient of? Because Blake hugged him and that was fine, right? And we've seen footage of that. That was fine. But if he does it, apparently they're going to try to make an issue of that. Okay. But it goes a step further. So, and he's like, I can't freaking tell you how many times I hugged people. I don't know, because I'm not a creep who keeps track of that shit. Again, Vivian Baker, Miss Lively's makeup artist, also talked about the culture of hugging or whatever, but like she also came up and hugged him. So he said he found that odd, that she would complain about that. Okay. Do you remember earlier when you testified about the hot tub? Justin says, you're referring to what? When I was sexually harassed. Yes, because Justin had to, at the beginning of this encounter, at the very beginning of this deposition, I didn't read this tonight because we've already seen it, comes out of the gate hot, like, have you ever been sexually harassed? And then Justin was like, well, yeah. And then he described a scenario with actual sexual harassment where somebody put their naked genitalia in his face after he already said he didn't want anything to do with that. Okay. Do you remember that moment when you thought maybe I should do what this powerful person is suggesting that I ought to do? Justin says, I don't know if I testified to having a moment where I thought maybe I should do what he's suggesting. Okay. And he apparently talked about this, in a magazine interview once. And then Justin says, I remember seeing his naked genitals inches away from my face before he walked and lowered himself into the hot tub and asked me to take off my pants. So this right here, ladies and gentlemen, this instance of actual sexual harassment is what is being compared to hugging a coworker on set. A coworker who has hugged you. What? Okay. This is so ridiculous. Screw Gottlieb for asking about this. Oh, Gottlieb is a grade A douchebag. Grade A douchebag. I hate the guy. When I say I hate the guy, I don't literally hate the guy. I don't know him, right? But I hate everything that he's doing. And all I know of him is what he's doing here. And so I hate him, but like, not really. You know what I mean? If I ever saw the guy walking across the street, I would ignore the shit out of him. I don't actually hate him in that regard. You know what I mean? But as far as reading this deposition goes, I hate him. So, all right. Give me 1 second, guys. Hey, Perez, what's up? Is Lauren attempting to do the whole thing? No. I started at on the second day at page 183, because that's where everything we hadn't seen before started. But then there's like parts of where we have seen kind of interwoven in. So I made little marks on the side so I can tell when to read a whole page versus when to skip stuff. It's I have a weird process. So, but how you doing, Perez? Good to see you. Hope it's all good. Okay. We're not going to read this whole thing tonight, guys. There's no fucking way. If I thought I could stay awake, I would, but all right. So he's talking about this situation in the hot tub where Justin says he was sexually harassed, comparing that to the hugging situation for some reason, right? Did you ever hear from anyone on the set of It Ends With Us that the daily hugging was making them uncomfortable? Justin says there was a point in time. So after, like long after filming had started, I guess, Angie, I don't know if it's Ange or Angie. I mean, no disrespect. I just don't know how to pronounce it. Angie and Alex Sachs mentioned that. So they mentioned that to him. And what did he do? He says, I stopped hugging, because that's the normal human thing to do. Even if, people did like hugging him, he's like, I stopped hugging because some people were uncomfortable with it, right? Did you perform an investigation because people didn't want there to be as much hugging? No. And okay, so here is where we're going with this. He says hugging is one of the items that appears in your sexual harassment policy. He's not talking about hugging like, yeah, girl. Oh, you know what I mean? Like, ew, right? He's talking about like, oh, hey, what's up? He gives him a hug to see, like, you see somebody on set, your friend or whatever, who you have a good rapport with, who hugs you, and so you hug them. It's not like creepy hugging, right? But he says, I was unaware of my any official complaint of the hugging. In fact, quite the opposite. So Gottlieb here is making it seem like he should have reported the hugging as like an official incident, since he had some sort of managerial role on set, some sort of supervisory role as the director. And so remember the scenario I asked you to think about a couple of minutes ago when I said, if I was, in an office space where I was talking to somebody and just having a human interaction and said, I know you like to hug, but that's not my thing. I don't really want to be hugged. I want to go back to that scenario. So if you can work that out with that simple human interaction and it never happens again, nobody ever bothers anybody, nobody intends to be creepy or sexual or anything like that, and everything's fine after that. If that person then went to like some sort of institution or HR or something and said, I have to file a formal complaint or I need to start a formal investigation because Lauren said she didn't want me to hug her and I hugged her before, I would be humiliated. That would be humiliating. So humiliating. I would never, ever want that. So I don't know what the court's going to think of this policy. This is not the law in our country, right? This is the Wayfarer Studios policy. And I believe there is some nuance there. There's some gray area, right? There needs to be room for human communication without it escalating to something that's going to absolutely humiliate and scar someone in social settings. Like if you're somebody like me who's already like an awkward neurodivergent person and you go out of your way to try to communicate like a normal human and be like, I don't want to be hugged, and they stop and you think, oh my gosh, look at that. I did my best to communicate. It worked out. It's going really well. I'm not being hugged anymore, but we still have a good relationship, working relationship. And then that person goes and starts an investigation, and then everybody I work with finds out about it. Oh my God, that's humiliating. I don't want that. So no, I do not want people to automatically launch investigations over hugging. Jesus, friendly hugging. It's not like grab assing or like weird, sexy hugging, like with your clothes off. Like, I don't know what the fuck these people are thinking, but that does not warrant an investigation, in my opinion, if you have a very short and simple conversation about it and it immediately stops. So, this is not a one-size-fits-all situation, guys. Maybe document it. I would agree that maybe you should document it or something. But if somebody doesn't ask for or make an official complaint or want an investigation, don't launch one. My God. Jesus. It would be different if somebody like tried to plant one on your mouth, right? Because that's something you immediately need to be like, hey, no, stop. That needs to be escalated, right? But a hug, a friendly hug, no. Sorry, that's not the best use of anyone's time or resources, in my opinion, unless the person has asked someone to stop hugging them and that person continues to try to hug them. Then there's warranting an investigation. So, anyways. Yes, I see that everybody is hung up on me saying sexy hugging. You guys know what I meant, right? Like, you know what I meant, right? Is that just a me thing? Oh my God. We're not going to talk about it. Just give me a sec. All right, man. Somebody says, doesn't intent play a part in whether something is harassment? It depends. A lot of policies will say that something can be harassing behavior regardless of intent. But I think for the most part, it depends on what policy you're looking at, who you're working for, that kind of thing. For the most part, that would apply to persistent behavior, not an accidental misunderstanding. You know what I mean? Or like a miscommunication or a lack of communication. It's not going to be like, oh, somebody hugged me and I didn't like it. I told them to stop and they did. It's going to be like, I told him to stop hugging me and then he consistently kept hugging me. That's creepy and that would warrant an investigation, regardless of whether the hugger in that situation intended to make the person uncomfortable because it was persistent and they kept doing it. So it just really depends on who you are, or like not who you are, but where you're employed and who you're talking to, what you're looking at, that kind of thing. So, all right. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, improvised mouth hug. You guys are nuts. Okay. Moving on. Anyways. Okay. They said they told him apparently Miss Sachs and Miss Slate thought the set was too huggy. So it was a generalization. I believe the word used was huggy or comfy, which would have been a strange thing to report. So it's like, why would I report that for an investigation if somebody said the set was too comfy? I remember being extra conscious and aware of the energy between who I were to approach on a daily basis and who I were to hug. I remember shifting to many more high fives than hugs, including solely for Miss Slate and Miss Lively. So good morning, high five. I don't think there was ever a hug that took place between myself, Miss Slate, or Miss Lively after I became aware that the set was too huggy. Right, and that's how it should be. So, okay. So now we get into this accusation that Justin said he had conversations with Blake's dead father, right? Let me shift gears. Did you ever tell Miss Lively you spoke to her deceased father? Right. Okay. And so he wants to provide some context on this, and I think Gottlieb is going to let him. Hang on. Your answer is no, because in your view, you told Miss Lively you had prayed to her deceased father. Okay. So that's quite different. Like some people believe in that, praying and like kind of including the people they've lost in their prayers. I don't think that's a malicious thing. If it's something that makes you uncomfortable, again, you have to communicate that. If it continues beyond that, then that's a problem. Okay. Was there any point in time when you told Miss Lively you communicated in any form with her deceased father? Justin says, I insinuated to Miss Lively in a conversation where the previous day we had spoken about life after death and various things, which we don't have to discuss now, that I had prayed for her dad and I asked him to bless our movie. Okay. Again, if it's not your cup of tea and you think that religion is something that bothers you a lot, you just have to communicate that. Who else was there when you had that conversation with Miss Lively? Okay. Justin says, this was at her, I don't know what you call it. She used to call it Buckingham Palace, as she said, because so many celebrities walked through there. Oh, wholly out of touch. Okay. All right. Okay. I think that was her office in her penthouse apartment, which was the place that Miss Lively requested all of our meetings be. It was just her and myself. Okay. It's your testimony that Miss Lively used to refer to that as Buckingham Palace. Justin says that's what she and Miss Reynolds would call it. They may have said it was something that Taylor Swift had said. Okay. And so your testimony is that at a meeting in the office in Miss Lively's apartment building, you shared with Miss Lively that you had prayed to her deceased father. Justin said for and asked yes. Asked him to bless our movie. Mr. Gottlieb says, is there any other time that you can recall that you mentioned Miss Lively communicating in any way with her deceased father? Justin says, may I ask a clarifying question? What do you mean by communicating? Right. If communicating means a two-way conversation, is that what you're implying? I'm suggesting to Miss Lively that I had a two-way conversation with her deceased father, because that's not what happened, right? So Justin says, may I provide a little bit of context and then answer your question. The question being, what did you express to Miss Lively about whatever interaction or message or prayer that you had with her deceased father? Okay, so Justin says he's going to give some context here, and he certainly does give some context. By some context, I mean it's like a long amount of context. So give me 1 second here. Shorty P says adults communicate their boundaries. I agree. And I think that there are, there's hardships for people who have certain triggers who, lots of people don't have those same triggers. So there's going to be like normal things that would be considered normal human interactions for some people that would be triggering for others. But you have to learn how to manage your triggers and to communicate your issues and what you like and don't like, or if you're uncomfortable, you have to learn to communicate that. Unfortunately, that's a reality for a lot of us, especially if you've been through some sort of abuse. Like, you have to learn how to manage your own condition and your triggers. I mean, you can't expect the world around you to know everything that you're going through all the time. You have to be able to communicate that and say, I don't like this. I don't want this. I don't want that. I'm not okay with that. And you have to learn to be confident about that, and to speak out about it. And if they continue to treat you wrong after that, then raise hell, dude. Do it. Raise hell. Make them pay for harassing you or whatever. But if somebody makes a mistake and hugs you when you don't want to be hugged, just tell them you don't want to be hugged. And if they stop, don't punish them for it. Don't punish them with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damages. Like, that's ridiculous. All right. Okay. Anyways. Let's do this. So here's Justin's monologue. I say Justin's monologue because you're going to realize in a minute, it is a monologue. Okay. Justin says, the previous day in her office, as was customary, Miss Lively and I were having conversations about all sorts of things. She was an actor, and I'm a director, and I'm also an actor, and part of that is getting to know the person that you're acting with. This is something that all acting coaches and people, I believe, at a high level do. You get to know the person that you're working with. Okay. Quality monologue, but still a monologue. And I was made aware that Miss Lively's father had passed somewhat recently, I think within a few years. And I imagine it might be difficult to be making a movie for the first time since his passing, since I learned he was like an acting coach. So I asked her if this was the first film she's made since he's passed. And she said yes. And I think I said something about that must be hard. And what was he like? I've always found it in my years of experience being a human that oftentimes it's nice to discuss the memories of the people who have passed. And from what I had heard, they were very close. Again, like I said, quality monologue. Great human, but this is totally a monologue. And I don't mind it at all. I have no complaints about it. I'm just saying it was a monologue. I mean, look at how many pages it goes. So just a way of having a conversation with Miss Lively to build a connection as we were working together fairly intimately. So she shared a little bit about her dad. I remember asking if she had any spiritual beliefs or so. And then I asked if it was okay if I shared mine. And so I shared a very brief summary of my faith. specifically because I said that we have some really beautiful beliefs about life after death. So obviously he's trying to be comforting to her. And obviously she didn't have a problem with it at the time. But again, it's like in retrospect, when somebody's trying to complain about something you've done, they go back to a bunch of other things that you've done. They'll be like, well, I didn't like that either. I didn't like that either, even though they didn't say anything about it at the time. So like, how were you supposed to know? Also, I don't really believe, based on what I've read and seen, that she had a problem with him before she filed this lawsuit because of what Stephanie Jones blew up, and she took her word for it, that there was some sort of smear campaign against her. I think that Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni seemed to have a pretty decent relationship before they started filming, and even in the first little bit of filming, between their like text messages, it seemed like they had a decent, personal interactions. Maybe she was even a little inappropriate from what I could tell, so he had that rapport with her to where she could joke about stuff like that and he could joke back. So, all right. So naturally, him being supportive and trying to talk about his faith in connection with her losing her father, in the context of their relationship and everything she said to him, not really a problem. Okay. And so I then shared that I believe that those of us, the people in our lives, our loved ones who pass on, are closer to us now than they were when they were here. It's quite clear reading that sentence that he was trying to be comforting to her and kind to her. Again, another moment of like kind humanity. And this comes back to bite him somehow. And I just hope that this experience doesn't stop them from having that kind of kindness in the future. Because I think a lot of us would love to have that in our lives, that kind of support and that kind of thoughtfulness. And it sucks that they're being punished for it. So, all right. I gave her the analogy of the womb and how in the Baha'i faith, we are told that we are infants in the womb. We have our whole world of existence. We are developing things. And mind you, she said it was fine if he talked about their faith, right? So they were having a conversation about faith, life, and death, right? This deep conversation, okay? So, we have a whole world of existence. We are developing things. We are developing our eyes, our ears. We're developing our skin, our lungs. We're developing all of these things, but we don't have any use for them in the womb world. All the while, we are coexisting in this world. So basically, a baby is in both places at once. So there's a lot of deep stuff here that, I'll be honest with you, I don't totally understand it, but it sounds to me like it comes from a place of humanity. Like I said, humanity, just like really trying to be a good person, that kind of stuff. But hey, I think both depositions were removed from docket. Should we stop reading it until Wayfair shares it? What do you think? No, sorry. It's been all over the internet today, so it's all over the place. They have written to the judge about it. I definitely didn't show any personal information or addresses. I blacked that out on my document anyways. So no, I'm not going to stop reading it because it's already a public document at this point. She released it to the public. Now she has to face the consequences for that if, that's what's decided. So, okay. Somebody says, Lauren, when connecting with a person and sharing personal stories, these types of conversations happen. It's from a place of caring and trust. Now she violated that. I agree. It's very much like something I think a lot of people wish that they had in their interactions when they're going through hard times. And like, we live in a society where everyone has to be so freaking careful all the time to subscribe to like a certain idea of what things should be, that it's like you can't share these kinds of things. But when you have a comfort level with someone, when they're your friend, you think maybe it's okay. And she made him feel comfortable. She made him feel like he could trust her and she was his friend. And so he opened up, and then she freaked out later on and said, no, blah, blah, blah. And we'll never know how much of that really came down to whatever her feelings were and how her husband reacted to that, because she has now invoked marital privilege. So we'll never know. But probably. Anyways, we'll probably never know. For sure. Anyways, let's move on from that. We are aware of the baby in the womb, and we can pray for it, and we influence it. And then I just explained that our belief is when we die of the womb, we're born into this world, and we need everything that we were developing. But when we die in this world, we only take with us our spiritual qualities. But as it relates to her father, I was explaining that where we go next, which I believe you can call it heaven, or I believe you're Jewish, like most of my family, whatever you believe in or don't believe in, what I was explaining to her was that I believe that just like we could pray for the baby in the womb, I believe they can help us and pray for us, which is why all these little coincidences and miracles can happen. One sec, guys. All of this womb talk. No wonder Blake sexualized the concept of birth. No, that's still weird. That's still weird, dude. So weird. I understand someone feeling uncomfortable if they think someone's trying to convert them. I mean, yeah, there's that, but he's obviously, in my opinion, just sharing his thoughts and beliefs. He's not trying to convert her. There's a difference between opening up to someone and trying to convert someone, right? So I'm somebody who's not religious. I'm not a religious person. I don't think I would say that I'm like an atheist per se. I just have my own little beliefs about the world and I kind of keep them to myself, right? But when people open up to me about how they feel about like God and Christ and any other sort of religious figures, no matter what religion someone is, I take that as they're coming from a place of wanting to connect, and they're wanting to connect based on something that's extremely meaningful to them in a positive way. So I think it just really depends on who's receiving the message. I personally, I would take this, I would be like flattered by the attempt to connect and to be kind and to be supportive. But I understand there are other people who would take this differently. So I can't really tell you how to feel in a situation like this. I can only tell you what I think, as always, which is the same with everything else I read to you in this lawsuit. Is I believe that this came from a good place and it was spun into something nefarious. And it's unfortunate because I think it's going to hurt good people for the wrong reasons. So, but yeah, I don't get the vibe that anyone's trying to convert anyone at all. I believe you can have discussions about your beliefs without trying to convert someone. I believe you can care enough to speak from your heart and your spirit, your spirituality, and talk to somebody from like the deepest parts of you, and because you care about them so much and you want to comfort them, you want to do something good, and that can come across different ways to different people. But I tend to lean towards the more human side of this person's trying to do good here. And so I receive it differently than I think Blake probably did. Or actually, you know what? I don't know how Blake received it at the time. It seems like they had a pretty good relationship. So I think it's in retrospect being framed differently, but it is what it is. So, all right. Anyways, we're still monologuing here, folks. So, like I said, this was a great monologue, but it's still a monologue. So based on that conversation, which I actually went back and told my wife that Miss Lively and I had a lovely conversation about life. She seemed very engaged, but also she's an actress, so maybe she wasn't. I mean, fair enough. The next morning when I came in, because I had prayed for her father, I let her know that. And so it was in the context of this larger conversation, which I summarized shortly. It was much longer than that I offered prayer for her father, and I asked him to bless our film because I believe that those who have passed on can still help us. I wasn't in any way saying that him and I had a conversation and broed out, and that wasn't at all the context. Nor do I think if you were a witness in the room, you would have felt that way. Okay. And then Alex Shapiro asked for a break. That's Justin's attorney. And Mike Gottlieb says, after I'm done asking a follow-up question to that answer, which was approximately 6 minutes long. And dude, I loved that. Like, that's the kind of thing that I would love to. I would sit there and listen to a lecture about that. You know what I mean? I would sit there and listen to that for 6 minutes. That was like total human kindness right there. So I don't really care that it was 6 minutes long. I'm just saying it's kind of hilarious that he is like doing his whole deep spiritual thing during a deposition to the point where he spoke for 6 minutes. And Mike Gottlieb is just like, well, that was a 6 minute response, by the way. No, I loved it though. I thought it was great. Like I said, people receive things differently. I received that as like in a very kind human way that I would absolutely love to work with or for someone like this. I think that this seems like a good person to me. At the very least, this has nothing to do with sexual harassment. You know what I mean? So, all right. Justin stole 6 minutes. Yeah, he took 6 minutes, I guess. All right. Anyways, you gave me context. I told you could. Okay, so he did tell Justin that he could give context. He just didn't know it was going to be 6 minutes long. At any point in time, can you think of, did you say to Miss Lively that you had spoken to or had a conversation with her deceased father? Mike, did you not get the answer to that question in the 6 minute monologue that preceded it? Like, did he not answer that question in the 6 minutes prior? I think you checked out, buddy. All right. Justin says, at no point in time have I ever spoken to Miss Lively and said that I had a conversation with her deceased father. Nor have I ever said to anyone that I've had a conversation with anyone who was deceased, as I was not born with that ability to speak to the dead. Oh my God. Oh, give me 1 sec. Okay. We're probably gonna have to call it for the night pretty soon, guys, but let's read a little more. Okay. Can we please take a break? I'm almost done. One more question. Okay. Do you recall ever saying to Miss Lively after she referenced in a joke, tell my dad he owes me $40? Do you recall ever pulling $40 out of the coat of one of your pockets? So Miss Lively here says she joked that her dad, like she joked about Justin's religion and his beliefs about praying to people. And she said, well, when you talk to my dad, tell him he owes me $40. And then she says Justin at that point pulled $40 out of his pocket as if he was giving her $40 from her father. That's not exactly what happened here. Okay. So that's what Gottlieb asked. Do you remember after she referenced in a joke, tell my dad he owes me $40? Did you recall pulling out $40 from your pocket? Justin says, I remember a funny coincidence and I don't believe it was $40. I believe it's 20. So from my perspective, the reason I remember it was 20 because on the way to her apartment, I found $20 on the road. And I remember it was 20 because I'm sure if you found $20, that's a very rare thing to find. Well, it's not every day you find $20 on the street. I haven't. I mean, I would love to, but. So she made a joke, as Miss Lively often does, and I made a joke back. So he joked back like, oh my gosh, I just found $20 outside. Okay. If you guys have that kind of banter in your relationship, who am I to judge? You know what I mean? I found $20. That was it. It was two people joking. It was never intended nor meant to be anything that was serious. And I did find $20. So he's like, I found $20 outside. I'm going to go, Your Honor, counsel's request now. Okay, we're going to take a break. Okay, so this might be a good point for us to stop at tonight, guys. Like I said, I'll come back tomorrow morning. What do you think? Let's say 10:30. Yeah, we'll do an early morning one. I can start work early, and then I'll take my break early, and then we'll do this. How about that? And we'll start at page 198 here, so I will remember that. All right. That's all I got in me for tonight, guys. But I appreciate you guys for watching. And it's 10:16 p.m. Yeah, if I want to get up for work early enough to be able to stream at 10:30, I should probably be going to bed pretty soon. So there's just a lot of pages in this, and I want to make sure I'm not, if I tend to do like a longer stream, like a 3-hour stream, I burn out in the last hour. So it's probably a good time to call it. It's been an hour and 20 minutes or so. So, all right, everyone, don't forget to hit the like button for me. I appreciate that. It helps me out a lot with reach. And I will see you guys in the morning, 10:30 a.m. I'll set that stream up tonight. So if you look out for it, I'll put a link in the post tab on my YouTube channel, and I'll post it on X and on my Patreon. You can join my Patreon for free if you want to get notifications and links and stuff like that. So feel free to do that. It's in the description of this live stream and every video that I post. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I will see you all very soon.